And now,
from Greater Sandton to the rest of the world, this is the Sandton Times Hour with your host,
Alexander.
Welcome to wherever you find yourself. This is the Sandton Times Hour edition 252, week 29 of 2026. I'm Alexander Leipner, and if you're listening for the very first time, give us a little message or emoji or voice note, whatever you prefer. A bit of proof of life from you, and I'd also like to take that opportunity to welcome you to the show. So you don't have to do anything more than that, and it's always good to hear from you. If you're a regular listener in South Africa or somewhere across the globe, be it online or on air, greetings to you from the skyline and vantage point of Sandton, the economic gateway to South Africa. And if it's happening here, chances are it's going to be coming to a town near you, but you get to hear all the latest here first as it comes across my desk. I hope you've been keeping well and warm since the last time we connected. Let me encourage you to kick back, take it all in over the next hour. This is our time together. What's coming up? In a bit, we kick things off with a bit of motoring in our Sandton Drive feature as we take a look at Chery's taking over the former Nissan factory in Pretoria and what it means. More coming up in a bit. Then one of South Africa's biggest bands marks 15 years since playing together for the very first time. I'm going to be chatting to one of the band members in the next hour. As always, I then catch up with our regular entertainment commentator to take a look at the latest entertainment to watch out for this week. And finally, he's one of South Africa's leading conservationists and businessmen, and he joins me for an in-depth chat. Stick around for this and so much more. We've got a great hour lined up, but as always, I'd like to hear from you. So maybe drop us a line with a bit of feedback, some thoughts, feelings, comments, whatever you feel like, questions. You can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on social media @Sandton Times, as so many of you have. It's great to see you popping up on Instagram, Facebook, X, or whichever one you prefer. Then also there's WhatsApp, 084 Sandton, that's 084 726 3866, 084 726 3866, the exclusive Sandton Times WhatsApp line. And also don't forget the website, sandtontimes.co.za, that you can check out. If you're not part of the podcast community, be sure to subscribe to the Sandton Times Hour on your preferred podcast platform. Whichever one you prefer, it's free, complimentary. You can catch up on all the previous interviews and chats that you might have missed right there.
From Sandton's core to South Africa's corners,
this is the Sandton Times Hour.
Chery has officially opened its new manufacturing plant in Rosslyn, Pretoria, marking a major milestone as the Chinese automaker transitions from importing vehicles to hopefully building them locally. The move represents a significant long-term investment in South Africa, with production expected to begin mid-2027. The company plans to retain nearly 700 existing jobs while creating close to 3,000 more across manufacturing and its supply chain, and that's according to the company. The facility, once belonging to Nissan, is set to become Chery's African manufacturing and export hub, reinforcing the brand's rapid growth in South Africa, where it has become one of the top-selling passenger vehicle brands. To take a dive into this investment, what it means for the local automotive industry, employment, and South Africa's manufacturing future, well, I'm joined by Sean Nurse, motoring editor at AutoTrader South Africa, as well as William Kelly, who's a motoring journalist and host of podcast Watts and Wheels. And welcome to both of you on Sandton Drive on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thanks, Alex.
Pleasure to be here as always.
Fantastic. Well, maybe let's just quickly kick things off to just understand this transition. It used to be a Nissan factory. It's now a Chery factory. How easy is it to swing from one motoring brand to another in this instance?
Sure. Not easy. The technologies are fundamentally different. So it's not a case of you just go and buy Nissan stuff and start manufacturing Chery stuff off the Nissan line. It doesn't work like that. The manufacturing techniques are very, very different. And the Chery manufacturing line that they're bringing in, incidentally, is an interesting one in that it's extremely high tech, a high degree of automation, and most importantly, fundamental, I think, to their business model, it's multi-car capable. So Chery will be able to make a different number of different vehicles on the same line at the same time, and that's a very important distinction for their line, as opposed to something like the Nissan line, which was set up to manufacture a specific model like the Navara or whatever the case may have been in the past. So there will be a huge amount of investment that needs to take place, significant configurations or reconfigurations of the factory and so forth.
Sean, is this a like-for-like transition? We know the likes of BMW, Mercedes, VW, of course Nissan, created big secondary markets, supplier chains that would feed into this factory as they manufacture these cars. Is this that kind of business, or are the Chinese manufacturers operating slightly differently? Is this just going to be an assembly plant where everything comes in from China and is just assembled in Pretoria and sold?
Well, according to the brand, they are targeting 40% local production in terms of parts initially by the end of 2028. And the ultimate goal is 60% of the parts that build these vehicles to be locally sourced from local OEMs and local manufacturers. So it seems like there is a plan in place for it to become slightly more localized. Obviously, we'd like to get to a point where the car is 100% sourced from South Africa. I don't think we will ever get there, but we can live in hope. The fact that they do have a plan to localize it a bit more is a good thing. And I think with Nissan looking to exit most markets, I mean, it's not just Chery taking over this facility in Rosslyn. They're also looking at taking over one in the UK, I believe, as well. So it seems like they are just going after the Nissan factory. And as William mentioned earlier, the tooling for the factory is completely different. I actually saw a lot of the Nissan equipment going on auction in the weeks leading up to us going to the factory. And I had access to the factory in the Wednesday before the big press conference and walked through the vast production halls that are completely empty now. It was like being in a ghost town. It was actually quite depressing, but I suppose that liminal space will make space for a new production facility next year, and hopefully it will look a little bit better and more complete the next time we're allowed to visit.
Well, you've touched on it. You've both seen the factories, or you've been there for the official opening this past week. What are we expecting Chery to manufacture in South Africa, Sean? What cars will be produced on home soil?
So at the time of us recording this segment, the two models that I can tell you are confirmed are Jika from the T series, likely a T2, and a Motor JQ have confirmed that the J5 will be built here in both new energy and internal combustion guise. I can also speculate based on the platform, and as William mentioned earlier, the multi-platform and multi-vehicle manufacturing techniques that Chery will be bringing, that we'll very likely get a Chery Tiggo of some description, probably a Cross or the Tiggo 4 Pro, and of course the latest Lepas brand. I'm actually sitting in one as we record this now. It's a Lepas. There will be a Lepas, I believe, that will form part of the production strategy in future too.
Will, is this a good sign for South Africa's automotive sector, given that it's also been under a lot of pressure, much like the rest of the world is dealing with a whole bunch of economic and political issues?
Gee, toss me a hand grenade. Thanks, Alex. With the pin pulled out. Look, I've called this the canary in the gold mine because, as we know, our OEM's under significant pressure, specifically when it comes to localization, because South Africa is deindustrializing. And you know that when Toyota and VW are jumping up and down like really angry hot things under the collar, because local steel manufacturers going away, and that's going to affect their localization content quite a lot. Chery coming into this market to make new cars certainly raises a few eyebrows in terms of what are they going to be doing differently to make money out of this thing? What is their business model? How are they going to explore the local conditions, achieve their 40% localization, and so forth? And so that's why it's a really, really important and significant step for the OEM landscape in South Africa at the moment, because you know the Chinese have a different way of doing business. We've seen that in the way that they are able to generate cars seemingly in under a year from concept to execution. It's phenomenal the way the technology has accelerated and deployed. And so the manufacturing techniques are certainly something that we want to keep a very close eye on and see how they're able to leverage that to their advantage in South Africa. So yes, I think it's a fantastic investment. I wish them everything of success, and we're watching. You know, it's if they can make it work here, then we really do actually. It's potentially the beginning, possibly, of trying to turn the ship around from deindustrialization to possibly reindustrialization, which is something we desperately need.
We're certainly going to keep an eye on it, and I'm sure the three of us are going to regroup sometime down the line, I think, as this factory comes online to see how it rolls out. Sean Nurse, motoring editor at AutoTrader South Africa, William Kelly, motoring journalist and host of podcast Watts and Wheels. Good to have you on the Sandton Drive on the Sandton Times Hour, and thanks for making the time to chat.
Been a pleasure. Thanks, Alex.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
This is where it gets interesting.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
South African music trio Casa officially kicked off celebrations marking 15 years in the music industry with an intimate rooftop event at the Radisson Blu Gautrain Hotel in Sandton, the very place where J Something Moti and Dr. Duda first met. The event also marked the start of a year-long anniversary campaign that will include new releases, performances and collaborations as Casa celebrates a legacy that has made them one of Africa's most successful live acts. Here to chat about the celebration a bit more is Moti, band member and trumpeter of Casa. Welcome to the Sandton Times Hour, Mo, and congratulations to you and the entire Casa band.
Oh, man, thank you so much. Thank you for also making the time for us to speak on this beautiful milestone that Casa has actually just been celebrating, which is the 15 years. So, yeah, really good to be here and looking forward to sharing more stories with you.
Well, let's rewind the clock to that fateful evening in Sandton when you met 15 years ago. Just tell us about that evening. How did that unfold? It's
so interesting because the three of us came from different parts of the world, let me just say, because as you know that Jay's from Portugal, but he's obviously spent lots of time in South Africa, or should I say since his childhood days. And then I'm from Alex Township and Judah's from Mpumalanga. But, just to fast forward that part also is that I think we were all going through our personal journeys at that time in the world of music. And, I'll speak on where I came from, and which was at the time staying in Pretoria and going through the most, It's when I got a call from my brother to come and jam with a DJ / producer called Dr. Duda. I was like, I've never worked with Dr. Duda before, but I do know of Dr. Duda. And then when I got there, because I was the last one to arrive that day, and I found Duda jamming with J Something. Mm-hmm. And they, were keeping the party going. And Jay would take some intervals. And then when I arrived, and then it was towards the end of the performance, that's when myself, Dr. Duda, and Jay, performed a track called Smooth Operator by Sade, a beautiful cover. And that's what caught everyone's attention. And to that point, we also felt that, hey, let's start a band, But it was so difficult because Dr. Duda had already established himself as a DJ. And with that said, is that people already knew Dr. Duda was, and then no one knew who J Something and Moti were at that time. So it's through Casa, and when even Dr. Duda said, great, guys, let's give it a bash, and it was so special from him also because he was about to release his next album as Dr. Duda, but he put that on hold just to start off Casa or kickstart off Casa with the three of us, of course, Yeah, the rest is just a beautiful story and just a journey that we've had for the past 15 years because, the music has spoken for itself. And since that day that we've blown up as Casa, coming from the special day when we met, it was just after the 2010 World Cup, Soccer World Cup. We obviously just, saw that we actually have something special that we can create and put out there. And that's the music you hear in Casa today.
How did you determine that the sound that you now have is the sound that you wanted to go for? And how would you best describe it?
To be honest, there's no sound that we even say or describe. Like, we don't even know. Like, when we create music, we're just creating music and saying, this sounds great. Or we love this, And, before any record leaves the studio, you have to love that record yourself. We started off as saying that we're making house music, but like we realized that it's more than house music, because we got instruments involved also. Yeah, we got like different styles of production also. We can make any song as Casa basically. So we don't want to box ourselves and say that we're a house group. We are, we just saying that we make music, like we make all types of music type. And so there's no really like a certain sound that we classify ourselves as. What I know is that our music appeals to nearly everybody. It's like, from your youngest kid to the oldest grandpa, like everyone just listens to Casa, and it's been like that over the years. So clearly there's a sound that, gets to the people, but it's very hard to describe it because we just see it as that we're making music that we love.
Some of your most notable songs that people still jam to this day are over 10 years old. Does that amaze you that an album that is that has already achieved that kind of mileage still fills dance floors and still has people getting up and dancing?
Take it back to these streets, take it back to Heavenly Sent, All the Glory, Jika, Turn You On. I could name all their hits, but I mean, like, those songs, every time someone would listen to them, they sound as if they were recorded yesterday. They are so fresh. And I think at times, we also feel that we've been so ahead of our time. And that's how the music can last, because we make music that's here to last. We're not making your December hit or your 1 month a December hit, and then in a couple of months that song disappears. All those songs have been songs that are still so seen as classics, but you still hear them on the radio, you still hear them online, you still hear them at our performances, and people still receive them very well. So it's a beautiful feeling seeing that after 10 to 15 years, these songs are still having their place within the music industry, and that really makes us proud.
Where to from here for Mikasa? Are we looking at another album? Any other big plans?
Definitely. We got so much music. It's even hard to select that what do we release, what do we not release at the moment, because, you can't release all the tracks at the same time. But I mean, and some tracks we're still working on, but definitely there's a big plans of an album release. We're also just having so much fun in studio. Whenever that we feel that we are in a creative mood and the creative space, and then we go for it, So yeah, definitely we will be releasing more. There's lots coming, and we're also going to be celebrating on the 15 years of Mikasa. We're going to have beautiful celebrations around the country. And yeah, there's just so many beautiful things lined up for us. So, it's just a beautiful blessing. And all I can say is thank you to the people that have been supportive towards the Mikasa brand, because without the people, we are nothing.
Well, Moti, trumpeter and band member of Mikasa, it's been so great having you on the Sandton Times Hour. Congratulations on 15 years, and thanks for making the time to chat.
Thank you so much. And we're looking forward to making even more magic, and we will definitely keep you posted on the album releases. And thanks again for the interview.
Keep listening.
There's more to come on the Sandton Times Hour.
Follow the Sandton Times on social media at Sandton Times. And we're back.
The Sandton Times Hour continues.
Heading into the second half of the Sandton Times Hour, my name is Alexander Leipner, and if you need any reminding about some of the content you listen to, but you didn't get all the details, well, you can go onto the show notes on the website, sandtontimes.co.za, and we try and get all the details up there of something you might have heard during the hour, but didn't manage to get a name, contact details, further information was all there on the website with some links and all the things that you might need to complete the picture. Also, don't forget that you can follow us on social media at Sandton Times and use the WhatsApp number 084-SANTON, 084-726-3866, 084-726-3866. And if you're listening internationally, it's +27 84-726-3866, and you can send through your voice notes, text messages, and more. And that's the exclusive Sandton Times WhatsApp number. Time to connect with our regular entertainment commentator, Tat Wolfen. And Tat, this almost feels like a little bit of a detective exercise as we look at the peculiar case of viewing on streaming platforms.
Sure, Alex, hi. But I think before we even get into streaming, I want to start with the cinema industry, and that would lead us into streaming. And you'll see where I go as I take us there. Okay?
Well, this is your investigation, so you structure it as you wish.
Cool. So, if I'm looking at the current state of the cinema industry, the word that comes to mind is parlous. Okay, so why is this so? People repeat. You talk to people about movies, and so many people are saying to you, there's nothing showing at the movies. Why would I want to go to the movies? And you know that I love the cinema experience, but I can't force people to go at gunpoint. What is happening? Okay, so the studios are fixated on the youth audience. Okay. The youth audience seems to be growing as disenchanted with current movie releases as their parents and grandparents are. And even these Marvel movies and big franchise movies that used to be guaranteed money spinners are now not necessarily the case. There is what you call Marvel fatigue or superhero fatigue, where actually, even surprisingly enough, these young audiences seem to be developing slightly more discerning tastes and going like, well, it's number 12 or number 17 in the franchise. What's new? There's going to be fights, there's going to be CGI, but is there going to be anything really that's going to make me sit up? And you must also remember that a lot of these kids were raised by their parents on the movies that their parents had grown up with. So, and I was quite surprised to discover this, but a lot of young folk have not only seen, but love movies such as Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Back to the Future, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Beverly Hills Cop, the Austin Powers movies. And if you reach even further back, a lot of kids have been exposed to, happily, great classics such as The Sound of Music, the original Snow White, the original Dumbo, the original Pinocchio. And those movies leave indelible impressions. So, now I'm going to ask, and, if any young listeners would like to sort of counter this and say, yes, we've seen movies recently that leave indelible impressions, I'd really like to know. But I think that there are very few movies that are coming out these days that you're going to be talking to your kids about in 30 or 40 years' time and saying, they don't make movies like that anymore. And then, you'd regale them with these tales of these movies and hopefully show them these movies so that they can see what they're missing out on.
I think there's certainly one or two that come to mind. I'm thinking of Frozen, which has got a very catchy soundtrack, but they're not as many as they were, like in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, Frozen has a song, Let It Go. Yes, it does. And look, I'm not saying also that there are absolutely no impressive movie coming out these days, because there are, and every now and then I'll mention them on the show and I'll say this is an absolute must-see. But, we're talking as a greater body. When you're thinking of movies from bygone decades, and even when you were growing up in the 70s and 80s, every time you went to a movie, it was a kind of a new experience. You'd sort of sit up and go like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting, because it would be, a different thing. It wouldn't just be part 23 of an ongoing franchise.
So I take it this is translating into the streaming platforms as well.
It most certainly is. And this is, I find, incredibly interesting when you look at the statistics. So if you look across the board, okay, whether it's Disney Plus, Netflix, and there's other ones that we don't have in this country, Peacock, Hulu, HBO Max, Paramount Plus, okay? If you look at all these streaming services, if you look at the statistics, which I have before me here, of what they call catalog, because catalog stuff is older movies, right? Older content, older movies or older TV shows versus, the new stuff where they say made for Netflix or made for Disney Plus or whatever, okay? Now, I'm going to start with the biggest disparity, which is in Disney Plus. In Disney Plus, people who subscribe to Disney Plus watch 95% catalog and 5% new stuff.
Sure.
I could go across all the different things, but then I'll just go to Netflix has the smallest disparity difference, but there still is a difference. On Netflix, people watch 60% of catalog stuff and 40% of newer stuff. But on all the other channels, Peacock, Hulu, whatever, it's like 94, 93, 89% of catalog stuff versus the newer stuff. What is this telling you? People are not seeing value in the newer stuff.
Sure.
It's apparent. And let me tell you what people are watching. The thing that people are watching mainly is the older TV shows like Seinfeld, Frasier. It wasn't my favorite, but Friends is also a popular stopover. Cheers. People are watching TV shows that are decades old rather than watch what's being made now.
And I mean, what made a lot of these old TV shows very charming is that they used to have these very elaborate titles with their own unique signature tune, and it was like, if I think about Murder She Wrote or like Full House and these sort of shows. Now these new series, there's no opening jingle, there's no music, there's no montage, nothing. It's just starts and that's it.
And where are the characters?
Yeah,
I don't see that same character-driven thing. When you think of Cheers, you can still think of, there's Norm, and there was Sam the bartender, and there was the grumpy waitress who name evades me right now. But there were these real characters that you felt you knew, and you had this kind of affinity for them. And the same can be said for Seinfeld. With Seinfeld and Kramer and George, they were such well-rounded, well-written characters. People decades later still speak about these characters.
Well, talking about characters that are well-rounded and all the things that you mentioned, we're going to catch up with them again next week, Monday, when you and I catch up again.
Certainly. Am I one of the well-rounded, rich, deep, and interesting characters in your life, in your show?
Well, stay tuned. You're going to find out next week.
To see if I'm still on. Cheers, Alex.
WhatsApp your voice notes to the Sandton Times Hour
on 084 Sandton. That's 084 726 3866.
So from pioneering private game reserves in South Africa to building one of the world's most respected conservation-led hospitality brands, Adrian Gardner has spent decades proving that tourism and environmental stewardship can thrive together. As the owner and founder of Mantis Collection, his vision has transformed unique destinations into world-class boutique hotels, eco-lodges, and conservation experiences across multiple continents. And right now, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Adrian Gardner onto the Sandton Times Hour. Adrian, thanks for making the time.
Oh, what a pleasure to chat to you. And thank you for your interest in our work, because as I tell everybody, without people like yourself and spreading our story, there would be nothing to say. So we need you guys, and thank you for your commitment to conservation and saving our planet.
Well, Adrian, let's rewind the clocks a bit and take us back to those early days before Adrian Gardner was the conservationist and hospitality pioneer. How did you get going in this business?
I think it was relative to my upbringing. Basically, although I was born in Zambia, but only lived there for about 5 years and moved to Bulawayo in Rhodesia, as it was then. And my father was very involved in cattle ranching for a company in the UK. And one of the farms was 150,000 hectares, and it had its own private game reserve on it. So we were brought up with nature and animals and that sort of thing. And I suppose that got into my blood at a very early age. So although I had a lot of different businesses in the Port Elizabeth, Gqeberha region over the years, I came here in 1969 from Cape Town, because I started off in Cape Town at the SPAR head office, then joined the SPAR distribution center here, and then we sold out, and then I had a bit of money and went on my own in the early 70s and did a lot of things here. We brought Kentucky Fried Chicken here. We had Page Boy here. I brought the first doors here, the spring doors instead of the weight doors. Then we got into crane hire and transport. And I think one of the important things in transport, I was in partnership with Ernie Els's dad for over 30 years. So obviously golf became a very important part of my life. And I was very privileged to meet many golfers and that sort of thing. But then we got into I had a little farm near Plet, and everybody laughed at me there. We bred racehorses, because my partner at the time was very keen on racing horses. I was more keen on breeding them. And then after a few years, we got it up and it was working. And I think we still hold the record in South Africa of 8 Group 1 winners in a year, Horse of the Year, Filly of the Year, and Sprinter of the Year. And then, I got an offer to buy it, and I was actually up in Zimbabwe, and I said, not for sale. That was on a Thursday. By Sunday, I'd sold it. So everything's got a price. So we then sold the horses to Sydney Press's public company. I had a lot of shares in that. And then, so I had some cash, and I thought to myself, you know what? I would like to have my own little farm with some animals on. And I went back to Zimbabwe. Thank goodness I found nothing there. And I went to the traditional areas of South Africa. And then I thought to myself, if I don't have something close to where I am, I'm not going to enjoy it. And then just by chance, this farm came up at a little town called Allisdale. It was only 1,300 hectares. And I think we paid 350 rand a hectare. But the other thing that it was close to, as we've just said, it was close to Grahamstown and close to this where my kids are at school at St Andrews. So it was in between the two. So we bought the first farm, then the second farm came, then the third farm came. And before I knew it, I had 11,000 hectares. And I thought to myself, my gosh, and then I read up the history of what actually the wildlife was here. And there was a book written by a guy called Ski, who really documented everything that's here. And it was quite frightening to read, to see that when the 1820 settlers came here and what they did to the wildlife to be able to have their cattle, goats and sheep here was quite horrific. And then they created plains as well because they needed grass. And, I looked at all this and I thought to myself, there's a chance of putting it back. And so I started to think about it and did it. And all the farmers around me laughed and said it would never work. And I can tell you, Alex, the only reason it worked was because, as I said earlier along when we were chatting, is that if I hadn't have got the endorsement and the things like that, so obviously I went to who I consider our Attenborough of Africa, Ian Player. And I went to Ian and asked him to come and look. And he was very supportive of what we were doing. And he got behind me and he brought many conservationists from around the world. And we got lots of top people to come and have a look and endorse what we were doing. And then, by 1992, we opened. We now bought in 89. We had the fence around, but we couldn't put lines in because we didn't have enough plains game and that sort of thing. So we had to wait till the year 2000 when we could have the big five there. And then by that time, the farm had grown to 20,000 hectares. But for me, one of the most important stories about that was when we put all these farms together, there were probably, 12 of them or whatever. 16 people were employed there. I think every farm except one was owned by an absentee farmer just for putting their livestock there. And now we did a census the other day, just between ourselves, founders, and the owners of Shamwari now, we employ over 500 people. And that's without the multiplier effect of airport, air transfers, food, booze, everything else that goes with it. And the lives that we've changed, in terms of the community. And I've always said that wildlife will never work without the community. So it was a journey that I suppose came from what I had in my blood about really being involved in wildlife and then being able to put back into the Eastern Cape what should have been here and should never been taken out.
And it's a tremendous work. I mean, if you fast forward, the portfolio of work that you've put together and the business that you've built around wildlife is remarkable. One of which is your very own homestead, Founders Lodge, still in the Eastern Cape, still very much a wildlife and outdoor experience. What memories does that property bring back as you think of it and as it is still operational and accessible to people right now?
Thank you for that. Yes, just to give you the background of how that happened was, in 2007, I sold 70% of Shamwari to Dubai World. And at that stage, you'll remember they owned the waterfront, off the waterfront with the Livingston brothers. They had many game farms around Africa, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Senegal. And the top guy from Dubai came and stayed at Shamwari. And he said, we need this guy and what he's doing here to help us do what we've got all these farms around Africa to do the same thing. And, I was pretty lucky, I think, then. So that was the reason that I really sold, was because I could think of nothing better to take the example that we'd set around Africa. Then 2008 came, and luckily I got my check just about Easter when the whole economy of the world collapsed and Dubai was under a lot of pressure and they decided to sell everything that they could. And they wanted to sell Shamwari as well. And anyway, they didn't sell it. They sold the waterfront. And I must give them credit. They've done a hell of a good job in what they're doing there. And I give that credit to my team. My original team is still there. The vet, the general manager, and the environmental manager and that sort of thing. And they've really done a great job there. But one thing I did was when I sold was I kept out my Founders Lodge on 300 to 400 hectares. And it had traversing rights over Shamwari. And when they bought it out, they had an option to buy it. They didn't want it. In fact, to be polite about it, gave me the finger and said, you can keep that lodge, but you've got a restraint order for 3 years, so you can't do anything there. And secondly, as part of the settlement to you, we're going to give you a house at Pearl Valley. And Pearl Valley, as you know, went into business rescue because they had getted 100% except for the one house that belonged to the directors. And that was part of my settlement, but I couldn't do anything on Founders for 3 years because they didn't want it. And I just used it then and, weekends and that sort of thing. But that got me into the Zambezi Queen collection because that was Namibian based and I was operating outside my restraint area. So, we've got the boats up there, which are very successful. And, so then after 3 years, I opened the lodge and I said, I'm busy now. It's Founders Lodge, where it all began. As you saw, we've tried to create the history of what we did there and what we did around. So, I just really would believe that people, when they came to the Eastern Cape for the first time, should really come and visit us because they will get the experience of what we did, going through the museum, talking to our rangers, talking to our general manager couple who are very passionate about all we did here. And I think that the biggest thing that's happened to the Eastern Cape is that all those farmers that laughed at me and everything, said it would never work, there are now 16 of these game reserves in the Eastern Cape. And farms are selling now at 20,000 Rand a hectare, which I get nothing for. And, from the 300 Rand a hectare. So, it shows you that the value has gone up tremendously. Now, the one thing that really, I suppose that it's a bit irritating is that, we have Addo Elephant National Park.
Yes.
And we've got all our game reserves together are sort of known, and we have a thing called Indala. And, I keep on saying to them, please change the name to Addo National Park. Forget about the elephants. You've got the big five there. You copied us. And we got a national park here, like Kruger National Park in Sabi Sand. We want Addo National Park and the Indala collection. So we've got a Sabi Sand here. But the one thing that we've got that they haven't got up there, we are malaria free. And when I started advertising this, some of my critics from the Sabi Sand said, you don't advertise negatives. You shouldn't be saying you're malaria free. So I said, don't worry. I will say to them, come and get a free malaria from you. So, that shut that one down quite quickly. So we've got a lot of things here. We've got the big seven here. Addo doing a great job in what they're doing with sand parks in the bay here. So, I really think that this is one of the best. And I'll just quickly give you an insight is obviously through Ian Player, Gary Player has become a good friend. And he brought his new partner that he's got, or friend, since sadly his wife died about 7 years ago. And, I sort of said to Gary, look, what's your knowledge of game? He said, no, I don't think she knows much at all. And I went out and had lunch with him. And I was talking to her and I said, tell me, what's your sort of background of Africa and all the rest of it? And she said, I've been everywhere. I've done the gorillas, I've done the migration, I've done Botswana, I've done the Sabi Sand. So now I'm a bit on the back foot. So I say, and now, and here, she said, let me tell you the one thing here, is that there are more species here than any of those other areas I've spoken about. I can't believe the number of species that I've seen here. The beauty of the landscape, and that we're not just in a forest looking for a leopard or looking for a gorilla or whatever the case may be. It's been one of my best experiences ever. So, with people like you getting that word out, that the Eastern Cape is a destination for wildlife, which I don't think, we probably number 4 on the list now, after Natal, Sun City area and that. We should be a major destination. Well, we obviously are because we've got so many lodges now. But if you look at the price we get compared to the Sabi Sand, it's a joke. So there you are. It's something that, I couldn't do on my own. It was an incredible team. Do you know that we opened the Saxon?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we were the first management company at the Saxon. And I got to Dostane and, I was having a meal with him and chatting to him. And, he was sadly had a very bad diabetes. So he sort of went to bed at 2 in the morning, got up at lunchtime, and I'm the opposite. I go to bed at 9 and get up at 5. And anyway, we sat the night there and we went around to a whole lot of different things. He said, what are you going to do here? I said, I've got absolutely no idea. I said, there's nothing like it in the country, so I can't tell you. So he said, well, you're the only honest one. You got the job. So we opened the Saxon. We had, I don't know if you knew that we owned Steenberg winery and the hotel there. And then we had a nice property on the Garden Route. And I had one in, we had about 6 properties, one in the Big Falls, Stanley, Livingston. And, you know, the big names had come to me and wanted to brand it, you know, and I just said to myself, you know, I'd rather create my own brand than building somebody else's brand, like Relais Chateau and that sort of thing. And Ian was staying with me, Ian Player, and I said, we need a name here. And he came down the next morning and he said, well, you achieved 2 things. You kept me up all night, and but I got your name. And he told me about the praying mantis, and, you know, with his guide, they were never scared of the big 5 because they could see here and that sort of thing. The praying mantis was always wherever they went, looking over them. And then he thought of Sir Lawrence van der Post, and, you know, he was very involved in the mantis and the Bushmen in Botswana. And the mantis there, they used to call it the Hottentot God. And so then he said, why don't we call it the Mantis Collection? And I said, I just loved that. And then we created obviously the acronym Man and Nature together is sustainable. And then, you know, again, we'd got to about 80 properties around the world. We were the only hospitality company on all 7 continents. And, you know, but what we were getting a fee, like a once-a-year fee for using our brand. But we didn't have a distribution system. We didn't have a loyalty program. So I had to get that. And so Accor, you know, when you were talking to them there, Craig used to be with me and he went to them. And I think he talked them in, Craig Erasmus, into having a look at us, and they showed tremendous interest in us. And in 2018, 2019, they bought 50% of the Mantis brand. And then, you know, we had COVID. So funnily enough, we got through another thing. But sadly, after COVID, you know, they had a lot more priorities than a small Mantis brand. So, you know, it's been difficult since COVID to keep that brand going. But, you know, we've got some good properties around the place, and thanks to the team that Accor have got and we're putting together, I still think we're going to see it grow. And, you know, also with Accor, I said to them, please can we do one other thing that I need so badly, and that is the community with conservation is very important. So can we create the Community Conservation Fund Africa? And they loved it. And I said, now, how many people in your loyalty program? So they said about 100 million. So I said, could we get $1 a person when they join you, or ask them to burn $1 worth of points for specific projects that we're busy with? And that was how it was meant to go. And it didn't really get off the ground because, I mean, they had other problems to sort out. But we've since then tied up with an international organization, it was American Humane, which I got them to form Global Humane, and they started Global Humane Africa. And they've come out here and are really giving us big support. And I'll tell you about another project that I'm busy with, which I really want to be part of my legacy.
Yeah, well, I was actually going to ask you about the legacy element, because you have been involved in restoring these properties, protecting wildlife areas, developing these unique tourism experiences. Which of these gives you the greatest sense of legacy, and why is that?
Okay, so I think that the real legacy that I want is that I don't know that there are many people in South Africa that know what the plight of the lions are in this country. You know that there are 8,000 lions in captivity, being bred for their bones or being bred to be hunted in what we call canned lion hunting. So we've been trying to put a stop to that. And we've really been working with government and the whole group that the government created to stop this. We want to stop this. And it's just, I found out that it has such a negative effect on our wildlife in South Africa that people, when they hear about this, are absolutely horrified. So we've created another first in the world, is that, you know, London boasts about Hyde Park and New York about Central Park. Well, we're boasting about a game park, because between Port Elizabeth, Gqeberha, and Uitenhage, Karecha, we've created a game reserve of 3,000 hectares. Where we are, it's like from where my office is on the beachfront here to there, 35 minutes. So if you're up the top, there's 15 minutes. and we're rewilding animals. And we've done a very successful cheetah rewilding there, where we've taken cheetahs in captivity, got them there, bred them, and put them back in the wild. And we're doing that with a lot of other species there and that sort of thing. But it's very involved with the community there. We're assisting them there in rugby and boxing and all sorts of activities that they've got there. But so the legacy that I really want to know is that with what we've created now, we're creating a lion safe haven. So in other words, we're taking some lions that were going to be shot or going to be killed for their bones, and we're creating a safe haven with a education center and everything. And I've partnered with a big international company called Four Paws. Because remember, I did the whole thing with Born Free, brought them to South Africa, got them to close the Born Free Sanctuary in London, the UK, and said the lions need to be where they are, and that is Africa. And so we're doing the same here with Four Paws, which are an international organization. And we're going to, with them and with a lot of other support we've got, we're going to really do our best to try and that would be a legacy that I really think would have an impact on what we do in South Africa and how we can change the landscape to being a proper wildlife destination without this trade in wildlife and the hunting and that sort of thing. So it's a big job, but I've still got a bit of energy left. And I think with Accor coming behind us and really supporting us with what we're doing there, we've got a big partner. So we've just got to get our voice heard.
Well, Adrian Gardner, he's the founder and owner of Mantis Collection. And if you want to maybe even get a taste of this provenance that he's been taking us through, well, Founders Lodge down in the Eastern Cape will take you back in history and also give you a taste of wildlife in South Africa. And Adrian, it's been so good to have all of this extensive time with you to chat.
No, well, I've enjoyed it too. Just as I say, I really respect people like yourself who are prepared to write a story. If you come here, please come to where it all began. We can give you a proper history at Founders Lodge. Our people are educated there. We don't have a sky bed. We have a railway carriage that was mine at some stage, which is another story. But if you can get the story across about the Eastern Cape becoming what it is, but it's not known well enough out there. So if you come to where it all began at Founders Lodge, I'm sure you'll give us support going forward. So I'm very grateful for your time and for being there. And Alex, to you, my greatest respect and thank you.
And with that, it's time to wrap up the Sandton Times Hour this week. Feel free to send through your questions, comments, or feedback. You can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. Check out the social media accounts at Sandton Times and visit the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. Then make sure to save the WhatsApp number 084 Sandton. That's 084 726 3866. 084 726 3866, exclusive to the Sandton Times Hour with your voice notes, text messages, and more. As always, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and join the growing digital community there. And thank you to all my guests who made time to be on the show this week and the team behind the scenes, making sure we make this happen every week. A special thank you to you for listening, and God willing, we'll do it all again next week.
Winner of the 2025 Telkom Radio Awards, Best Talk Show.
This is the Sandton Times Hour.